Hello guys, today I'll be telling you my character concepts for Marvel Rivals for Cyclops and Jean Grey. So we'll start off with Jean Grey, who would be a strategist with the average 250 HP. Her passive, Hosts of a Phoenix, would mean that whenever she died, her Phoenix meter would increase slightly. When it'd get full, it'd be full after her fifth death, and when it was full, she'd resurrect and become the Phoenix for 20 seconds before turning back to Jean Grey. We'll get back to what the Phoenix does later, and it's pretty cool in my opinion. But first, Jean Grey's primary fire would be a low damage projectile, it'd kind of be probably blue, but it'd be a telekinetic burst, and it would do low damage, but it would do a little bit of knockback. When she used her right click, which would have a 15-second cooldown, she'd rise into the air and emit a telepathic wave that would freeze all enemies hit for a few seconds. As well as just being good at disrupting her enemies, Jean Grey would be able to support her allies, for example, with Touch of a Phoenix, which heals the targeted ally, proportional to how full your Phoenix meter is. So if it was empty, you'd do some healing. But with each death you'd have, and the closer you were to becoming a Phoenix, you'd heal your ally more. Also, just to say, if your Phoenix meter was empty, like you just look normal, but the higher it got, the more a kind of fiery aura would flicker around you. So your enemies would have some awareness of how close you were to becoming the Phoenix. Her left shift would be similar to other short burst of flight abilities like Scarlet Witch's, but when she used it, she'd surround herself in a force field and would be able to fly for a few seconds, or until she cancelled the ability or the force field was broken. When Jean Grey uses her ultimate, Exceptional, her ultimate when she's Jean Grey, she lifts up all nearby enemies with her telekinesis, then just holds them in the air for a few seconds. They can still shoot and stuff, but can't use any movement abilities. And then after a few seconds, she hurls them away at high speeds. And this just A, gets them away from you, 2, because they're frozen kind of stuck in the air, it makes them easy targets for your allies. And now to talk about her ultimate form, the Phoenix, which would be a strategist kind of like by default, if you get my meaning, but would have 500 health. So, and if she dies as Phoenix, she would die. But if she transformed down to Jean Grey, if she was on over 250 health as a Phoenix, she would just stay on full health as Jean Grey. But yeah. Her passive would allow her to fly and also give nearby allies increased damage. And she'd have a new primary fire, Incineration, where she sweeps her hand through the air and sends out 3 bursts of fire in the direction she's facing. Telepathic Lockdown would be the same. Touch of Life would always do max healing because your Phoenix bars fall when you're a Phoenix. And then she'd also still have Shielded Flight, and that would be the same, but she wouldn't stop flying when it ended. It'd just give her a force field. Your ultimate charge stays the same when you change from Jean Grey into Phoenix. And if you manage to have your ultimate and use it as Phoenix, you'd be able to tap into the power of creation and resurrect all of your dead allies, as well as making them invulnerable for a few seconds. Yeah, and most of the time, I think people would probably want to wait until they're a Phoenix to use their ultimate. And now for the team-up abilities, which both of them can use. Great Minds is a team-up with Doctor Strange, which reduces the cooldown of your telepathic lockdown, which is your longest cooldown, and his portal, which has like a 3-minute cooldown, for a few seconds. So basically, their cooldowns are just good and quicker. So this would be very useful because Doctor Strange's portal is one of the best abilities in the game, and this would be a way to get to use it more than once per round. And kind of course, she'd have a team-up ability with Scott Summers, but this would be more passive than active, as whenever she was near Cyclops, he'd just gain his ultimate charge quicker. So quite basic, but just also, you don't really need to do anything to pull it off. Jean Grey would be a great control character with her primary fire having knockback, though it would probably have a low firing rate to compensate. Her Touch of Life and Shielded Flight would help keep her and her team alive, while Telepathic Lockdown can shut down enemies so she has good control on both sides. However, she is kind of lacking damage and range until she becomes a phoenix whose primary fire sends, well, fire. And as mentioned earlier, the higher your phoenix meter went, the more your body would flicker with flames. And if you have a generate ultimate when you're phoenix, it's probably the most powerful part about this character because, well, say Iron Man team killed you, but that was your fifth death. You could just resurrect as Phoenix, then bring all your allies back, and just his ultimate's kind of wasted. Then you would have had to use your ultimate, but yeah. And now on to Scott Summers, aka Cyclops. Cyclops would be a duelist with 250 HP, and his passive, Psionic Fatigue, is basically just about his psionic fatigue meter, which slowly decreases over time, but is you add to it whenever you use your abilities. And when it's full, or you become fatigued for a few seconds, as in it slowly starts to decrease. But when you're fatigued, you can't use any abilities or attacks and cannot be healed. His left click prime fire would be Optic Blast and it would be a hit scan like Hella's, and it would add a bit to his psionic fatigue meter. His right click would have a 5-second cooldown and would be called Concussive Force, and he'd be locked in place, though he could pivot, as he channeled a blast for a maximum 2 seconds, though you can cancel it early. And the blast would give you a fair amount of psionic fatigue, but also deal quite high damage and knockback. His next ability is probably the favourite which I've made, though his team ability I do love, and I'll get to that later. But his E ability is Interception, and for the next few seconds, or until he cancels it, he's locked in place. I'm sensing a theme here. But what you do is, within a certain radius, which should probably be, well, yeah, within a certain radius, you shoot a series of short blasts, each adding a bit to your psionic fatigue meter. But the blasts, you do one at each enemy in range, and then whenever an enemy fires a projectile into the range, if it's from their primary fire or secondary fire, Cyclops will shoot a bolt and then stop it. So basically, you just can protect your teammates in range and kind of lock down the area. Well, obviously, you are vulnerable while doing it. His left shift field leader is basic in comparison, with it just giving you and nearby allies a speed boost, and if there are 2 or more allies in range when you use it, your psionic fatigue meter is emptied. When Cyclops uses his ultimate, he'd get locked in place again, but he'd rip off his visor and unleash a guttural scream as a massive optic blast was shot from your eyes. So basically, a super, super, super enhanced version of your right click, and this would destroy terrain. It would be damage comparable to Iron Man's. Now for his team up ability, which is, well, I'll kind of be doing the part which Storm does in first, because Storm would have X boost, and then what she'd be able to do is she'd be able to, when she used it, she'd give the allied Cyclops a wind aura, which stayed for 10 seconds, and when he has a wind aura, he could use Optic Descent. And what does Optic Descent do, you may ask? Well, basically, while he had a wind aura, Cyclops could double tap space to launch himself essentially straight up into the air, but probably a bit forwards as well. So essentially a super jump. And then as he fell, he'd be able to hold space to lock himself falling straight down, but channeling an optic beam beneath him that damages enemies beneath you, as well as doing AoE damage where it would land. So basically, what he does in the first episode of X-Men 97, which looks awesome. And of course, this would increase your psionic fatigue. Cyclops blasts, that's what he does, but he does it in so many ways. He's a duelist who can support his allies, and works best being just behind your front line, where he can use interception to block enemy attacks, and speed boost your allies, but also being able to defend himself because he is going to get locked in place by his own abilities. The most important thing he would need to do is keep track of his psionic fatigue meter, because you didn't, yeah, the getting fatigued will be very bad, basically. And then that's why field leader helps you manage it, and that's another reason for staying with your team. If you made it this far, thank you very much, and if you haven't already, consider liking the video and subscribing, and maybe just going and checking out the other videos in this series. Next episode or video, I will be doing Black Widow and Captain Marvel, who are two very strong, well, two female Avengers who I haven't yet done and who aren't yet in the game, and who have been suggested for me to do. Ta-ta.